Good afternoon. Hopefully you can hear me all properly. So hopefully this will be a talk about field in AI with no BS. And if you feel like there's any BS, that's why there's a Q&A after, so don't hesitate to ask questions. So I call the talk The Shape of Things to Come, because I really want to focus on kind of the big picture of the field of field in AI, and also the future, and kind of talk about my vision for that future and those next steps. So coming up, I'll talk quickly about what is field in AI, mostly to give a definition that we can all agree on for this talk. I'll mention some use cases of field in AI. I'll talk about challenges, mention the state of the art, talk about its limitations, and open up on the future of the technology, as I said. First of all, I'll start by just quickly presenting who is actually presenting this talk. So my name is Glenn. I'm an AI and software engineer from France. I work with Felix, and I co-founded Chat3D, a French startup, now close to exactly a year ago. And we're developing a tool for the future of 3D modeling using generative AI. I'll talk more on that throughout the talk. But before we get started, I quickly mention we are currently raising funds. So if there's any interest, don't hesitate after the talk. So what is 3D Gen AI? You all have heard of generative AI. You all know the purpose of Gen AI, which is creating new content with a direction from the user. So here for this talk, I'll define it as creating a 3D object from user inputs. Most of the products on the market right now and foundational models for 3D Gen AI use prompts, user descriptions, or images as inputs. And to illustrate that, I've given you one of our own examples. This is a drawing from a video game studio we're working with, and this is the kind of outputs we got from Chat3D. And this was like a couple of months ago. So that should give you a good idea. This is a 3D model, even though it's a game right now. So as I mentioned, you all know Gen AI products, for example, for different mediums like text, images, maybe some of you know of video, generative models. These are all kind of mature products, especially for text and images, meaning that they are already used in workflow today. They are already used in companies today. You can get proper outputs out of them. This is kind of the state of things for other mediums. For generative AI, we have our existing products. So what about 3D? Well, there are some products in the market for 3D generative AI. Chat3D is one of them. There are others here that I mentioned, Sloyd, Tipo, Demos, 3DFI as well. These are all products that allow users to create 3D objects from a description, from an image, for different fields. For example, some might focus on architecture, others on the video game sector, and such. But these aren't really products that you might have heard of or you might know about. The technology behind them is impactful, but it's not really there yet, and we'll get to why later. So as I said, first of all, let's talk about the impact of the technology. It seems quite obvious for myself that I've been in the field for over a year now, but simply put, it's the productivity gain that you would get from getting a 3D assets that's customized without actually making it yourself. As I'm sure you all know, actually creating a 3D model for customized and specific use takes a lot of time, and it's concerned a lot of different industries. I've listed some here: the video game sector, animation, architecture, virtual reality, industrial design, as in the CAD models, could all be affected if the technology of 3D generative AI actually came to be and was easy to use and fast to use. I've chosen a case study from one of our clients here. The case study is of a video game studio. In this example, they actually wanted to make an ancient Greece themed video game. And so they had a ton of assets to make for the environments, and they wanted to make them with their specific art style. That already is what was limiting them. They had around 2,000 key assets that they needed for their environments, for outdoors, for sculptures and buildings, for example. But they needed to retexture them in their own art style, or create them from scratch in their own art style. That didn't allow them to use an asset pack, for example, very easily. There's still a lot of work to be done. And even if they had used asset packs like a base model, they had to do a lot of variations for different models like columns, for example, and statues. And so those are all interesting use cases where GenAI can actually really be the key. With Chat3D, for example, you're capable of generating assets in your own style that you constructed, and you can generate variations from a 3D model. So that would be a good example of how we can fix this issue, which was in the end very time-consuming for the video game studio. Actually, 40% of development costs went into creating that environment for them. So the question I want to ask you is kind of, as we said, no BS. Why isn't it fixed yet? There is a lot of interest for different fields. The impacts could really be huge. I'm sure I don't need to explain that much more to you. And there's tons of ways where it could actually be used. But there are two problems I perceive as being in the way of this kind of 3D GenAI revolution, where the products that use 3D GenAI are ready to use in pipelines. I would say, first of all, the complexity of 3D representations. I'll go over it quickly. We can talk about it more afterwards if you like. If you take the example of generating 2D images, you can represent a 2D image with pixels. Pixels have a certain amount of parameters that aren't really complex and don't change much. And this is very useful for training purposes. For 3D models, it's a different story. You can't represent a 3D model in a very easy way, I would say. There's two main ways of doing it: explicit representations, an actual 3D model like a 3D mesh or point cloud, or implicit representations, which are more complex. For example, you might have heard of neural agents fields or 3D Gaussian splatting. These are ways of representing 3D objects, but the number of parameters is way higher than for representing an image. And that means the training of the generative models is much more complex. There's also a lack of training data. That's really one of the main problems when you try to train a generative model for 3D objects. For example, if you take the data sets for images, the largest data set is Layer 5B that has 5 billion images. And the largest data set for 3D objects is Observer.xl, which has around 10 million 3D objects. It seems like a lot. It's not a lot when you're trying to train a generative model. I put some examples here. First of all, Get3D, which came out in 2022, which was worked on a lot by researchers at NVIDIA. These are some example generations. They look good, but as we see, there are some drawbacks in these models. Another one, more recent, came out in end of 2023, called the LLM for Large Reconstruction Model. This was by the Adobe research team, and it was really a breakthrough because they were the first to get the time for generating a 3D assets down really a huge peg. It took around a second to get these results, which again aren't perfect, but it's really encouraging. I'll continue with the state of the art right now. As I said, right now you can generate an object in under 1 second. You can get a 3D model from text in under a second, which is a big improvement, especially if you consider the state of the art a year ago or 2 years ago. 2 years ago, it used to take several hours if you were lucky, and the results, well, you had to be lucky if you wanted a good result as well. You have some higher quality generations that are also possible in around 20 seconds nowadays. I say high quality visually because it's high quality in kind of the aspect of the 3D objects, not in the parameters or the details, as we see just afterwards. And finally, you have a detailed topology. You have some physical-based rendering with the texture. It's not perfect, but you can get these sorts of 3D models that look quite good. This is an example output from Instance Mesh from Tencent, or from a research lab in Tencent from an image. This is quite a good result visually. This brings me on to the limitations. As I said, it was quite a good result visually, the last model. But if we look at the topology of the previous example, you see that it's not really great in terms of details of the topology. And if you focus on the mesh itself, it's really not looking good. This is kind of small objects in size, but the mesh itself is very dense. The triangles, the polygons don't look anything like what a 3D artist would do, or anything that a 3D artist could actually use for his work, for their work. So this really isn't the best result in terms of actual quality of the model. Another limitation we have today is the lack of diversity of the generated models. Because of the lack of training data, you often get some similar results from our prompts. That's not great if you want to generate variations, for example. So this is something that the architecture of the models need to improve on, but we also need to grow data sets to improve that. That will bring me to the future of the technology. Right now, we're seeing a lot more attention focused on the topology. So the details of the mesh itself, and also the quality of the mesh in terms of number of polygons and the repartition of their distribution, on the mesh. I mentioned the paper mesh anything that came out now, I think, over a month ago, and that was working specifically on trying to generate assets, 3D assets that would be closer to what a 3D artist would do. It's a first step that's quite encouraging, actually. There are also some newer architectures in terms of the models. I cited two, Kraftman and OpenClay, which are what we call 3D native architectures, and they give better results in terms of the topology and the mesh itself as well. And finally, I think that for the future, we'll have more so a focus on specific models for specific use cases. Right now, we're focused on asset generation, generating objects, but there are other fields of generating 3D models, like character generation, textile shot generation, which are completely different subjects and need specific models. This is an example generation from Chat3D. I'll show you some more, just to show that the mesh itself isn't perfect, but it's a big improvement on what we had previously in the state of the art. Here's another example, our progress over about a few months. This isn't really the state of the art currently for what is the output of Chat3D, but you can see the improvements both in terms of the quality of the object and in terms of the generation time. Here's another one, more focused on the topology. Topology, we believe at Chat3D is really going to be the main decision factor whether the model is going to be, the generative model is going to be used in a pipeline or in a workflow by a 3D artist. Because if you don't have a good topology, a good mesh, it actually can't be reworked or very difficultly. So here are the improvements we've made on that, before and after. We're getting closer to actual 3D artist results. And finally, I'll end on this, a vision for the future. Currently, our generation at Chat3D, we estimate between 20 to 30% of our client needs, meaning that for around 20 to 30% of the assets they actually need to generate, they can go through our platform. We estimate this percentage to go up to 80% by the end of 2025 with the current trends in the field. Right now, we're seeing a lot of developments, what we call behind closed doors, from private companies. We're seeing foundational models get really good from startups and smaller companies that are working on this problem, mainly because of the training issue, I would say. They have their ways of collecting training data, and so they get a lot of they get some better generative models. I'll mention this potential extension events from a foundational model. What I mean by this is we've been expecting for some time now, and we still expect in maybe the next 2 years, a moment where a foundational model, be it from a private company or from the open source community, comes out and kind of solves the problem of 3D generation. We expect a foundational model to get a really good level of a really good quality of generation for 3D assets, and that's going to really kind of disrupt the fields, which is why we call that an extinction event. Finally, we are seeing more people moving towards integrations in workflows. I've talked about this a bit. We can talk about it more during the Q&A. This is something we're really passionate about and focused on at Chat3D. We believe that integrating into workflows is actually the solution to staying in the picture of 3D generative AI products, integrating into the workflows of 3D artists, into existing tools and such. To do this, we're also giving more control to creators, mostly through features on our own products that allow users to choose a style, for example, for the generation, control the number of polygons, the type of polygons, and such. And this is going to allow for much easier 3D model creation for anybody who wishes to do so, and also for user-generated content, mostly in video games, which is another field we are quite interested in. Thank you for your attention. Hopefully that was clear, and I'm open for questions.